Well, I'm very, very pleased to be asked to give a short presentation. The reason why I'm so keen is because I think knowledge exchange is an enormously important part of the process of mathematics, doing it from the research and translating that research to a much broader community. I think if I could just say thanks to Nick for a brilliant talk, and really Nick has been trying to do the same things I think as we have, but by a very different means, communicating top quality research to a broad audience. So the purpose of this talk, the title is rather grandiose, but it's really to think about the way the Newton Gateway has played a role quite centrally to the community from its inception in 2013. And one of the reasons why I took the job of being INI director was because of the Newton Gateway. I thought it was a fantastically useful vehicle and one that was sorely missed. And the idea is to take us through the past and through to the future direction, the number of opportunities. So with that, I will pass on to Jane and I'll come back for the second half. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Alan, for the introduction. David said one of my favourite words just then, vehicle. I've often referred to us as a vehicle for knowledge exchange, helping to drive that forward, mathematics to the users of math. So yeah, just to say it's one of my favourite words. I'll try not to overuse it in this presentation. So yeah, there's a lovely picture of the Isaac Newton Institute, if for those of you who can remember. It's been some time since there were people in there, but I'm glad to say that we are getting some participants, just a few for safety reasons, wandering back to the building, and I'm also back in the office today, which does feel slightly odd, I have to say. So David and I were discussing how was the best way to present this. And so I've gone back to some of what I talked about in early 2019. I think it was January when we had a rebranding from Turing Gateway to Newton Gateway. So really just to remind you all, I think as you know, we are the impact initiative of the Isaac Newton Institute. We were launched in March 2013. It was the 25th of March when I started. I remember it well. And actually when I started, I came into what were then 4 sort of pre-arranged open for business workshops. And that was initially what we were here for, was to help spin out the research from the INI programme. So we kicked off with these 4 open for business workshops, which started at the end of March and ran through to April, and a lovely mix, as you can see, industrial stats. There was a policy one on communities and local government, stochastic and statistical models, the mathematics of liquid crystals. And I think some of these were also follow-up to previous INI programmes. So as I understand it, the concept of the Newton Gateway was inspired initially by the 2012 6-month research programme on semantics and syntax, a legacy of Alan Turing. So obviously this was in celebration of the 100th anniversary of Turing's birth. And it was also linked to the INI grant proposal to the Research Council. See, as a lot of you probably know, we put in grant proposals for the Institute every 5 years or so. And it was really recognised then that we needed to be pushing forward for more important formal mechanisms for delivering impact. And actually, the impact wasn't really on the agenda 10 years ago. This is what David and I were discussing yesterday. And I think that's true. I mean, I had previously worked in knowledge exchange, having worked on some of the old sort of KTNs and doing work with STFC and some of the other research councils. And it was on the agenda, but it wasn't the big deal that it is today. So, and also when it started to evolve, again, it wasn't really that joined up. Everyone was starting to do their own thing. And I like to think that the Gateway, working with some of our other partners, such as ICMS and the KTN and others, has maybe helped to push that towards in a more joined up direction, if you like. And I see us as being pivotal in that going forward. So as I said, this was linked to the INI grant proposal. and originally created to help develop impact for I&I programs on open for business events. So really, in terms of what we have been doing, I suppose we see ourselves as being a knowledge intermediary for the mathematical sciences. I mean, really knowledge intermediary. We're sort of brokering, we're bringing people together, we're sharing knowledge, we're pushing it out, we're disseminating. And we're all about, as I said, getting mathematics to the users of maths. And as you all know, that's other disciplines. We work with multiple disciplines and people across business, industry and the public sector. Broad brokering, with our dissemination, our communication, our translation. The translational aspects are so important, particularly for mathematics, the mathematical sciences, because it's so highly technical. And unless you can convey the message clearly and give people the basic understanding, you're not going to bring them to the table. And then specific brokering, of course, that's all about relationships and putting people together for collaboration. So user engagement, we do a lot of that. It takes on board most of the things I've just mentioned. This isn't us showing off, but I thought it might be useful to say that we have delivered over 100 events to date. And I missed out the 7,000 with more than 7,000 participants, but it is something over 7,000. And we work with over 700 organisations. So as I said, we provide KE support and impact for the Isaac Newton Institute. And we run these Open for Business workshops, which I'm sure a lot of you know about. Not for all programmes, of course, the really pure and theoretical ones we don't tend to do, but I would say for about 2/3 of the I&I programmes, there is often something that we can do. And when we provide KE support for these programmes, of course, we have access to world-leading academics on institute programmes, so that makes things a bit easier. So, but more generally, we do work with people across mathematical sciences, knowledge exchange in the UK. So we have always partnered with all sorts of people. I'll give you some examples in a minute, whether from industry funders, government institutions, learned societies, etc. And working with the UK maths community, the bond review, which is hopefully eventually going to lead to the National Academy of Mathematics, and I think David will be talking about that some more. David and I worked hard with the KTN and other partners to try and realise that when it happened a few years ago. Here's just some examples. I won't talk through these, but enhanced Open for Business events. So where we can, we always try and draw out the knowledge exchange and the potential impact and applications on programmes. So here's some examples of what we did. And in fact, that first one, engaging people in data privacy, which was linked to data linkage and anonymisation, that was definitely an enhanced event, because we ended up partnering not just with the organisers of that programme, but with EPSRC and GCHQ on that. Again, the 100% renewables, which was linked to the energy systems programme. We worked throughout that programme and in the run up to it with some of our partners across the energy sector, and with some support in the way of funding from the National Grid. The CI's Phenomena programme, which was a fabulous programme. We had lots and lots of spin-outs from that, including a really exciting satellite workshop at the British Antarctic Survey, who of course are very conveniently just down the road from the Institute. The Schlumberger satellite workshop, that was part of Corona Sean Lee and Co.'s Imaging and Vision programme. Schlumberger have got their UK research office in Cambridge again, so that was geographically very convenient. So they're just some examples there. I like to think we do reflect the diverse and underpinning nature of mathematics. Obviously, maths is in everything that we do, and I think it's really important for us to sort of stay on the ball, because we need to recognise these opportunities and try and create impact where we can. This has seen us, increase our calendar of meetings each year. It's been hard to keep up with it sometimes, but it's more achievable by working in partnership with people. So for instance, we're working in partnership with the IMA today. It helps us deliver more, it cuts down on duplication, and it just generally hopefully makes the whole thing more efficient. I would say that what we're very, very big about is helping to develop communities and build capacity for important science and technology areas, and often cutting edge areas as well. So the sort of work that we do, just very briefly, programs of work, which will undoubtedly encompass activities, events, etc. But a lot of what we're involved in is identifying experts in academia and joining up often disparate sort of fields and subfields across the mathematical sciences and also other disciplines, and just bringing all these generally unconnected people together. So that's a big part of what we do. A lot of what we do as well has become more prominent in the research scoping and horizon scanning type activities, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. We've also had to evolve with the pandemic, as everybody has, and I like to think that that's increased our ability to be collaborative. We've had to be more reactive and agile, but a bit more on that later. So here's just some examples for you. I won't talk in detail about all of them because I think I'm in danger of running out of time. Some of the things that really stand out for me, so novel computational paradigms, which I had the great pleasure working with Richard Pinch and some of the GCHQ colleagues on. That was very much a horizon scanning activity, because what we had to do was to bring together experts from multiple disciplines. And as you'll see here, I've listed some of them, because we were looking at novel technologies beyond quantum computing. And actually, I am hoping to do more on this going forward, because you know, these novel computational paradigms are still important. We need to do more, but there's a real sort of energy push on this now as well, in terms of the sustainability of these new systems and technologies in that area. So we hope to do more on that in the coming year. Evidence-based decisions for UK landscapes, that was something we started working on a few years ago. I have to say, it was funded entirely. It was a different way. We'd never done this before. We got funding directly from the key stakeholder, the end user, in this case NERC, to run this programme. And it did actually kick off from a conversation David and I had with Duncan Wingham, the then chief executive of NERC. And we went on to develop this scoping event. It then led to a month-long programme in July 2019. And then in September 2020, we ran a virtual follow-up to that. So, you know, I'm really quite proud of how that piece of work came to be and got carried on. And there will be follow-up work to come from that as well. Study groups, obviously we do a lot of study groups, even more so since we've been working in V-KEMS. And generally knowledge exchange and dissemination events, they tend to be more linked to research programs where we're trying to sort of disseminate some of the latest state-of-the-art research. Another activity, I suppose, if you're looking at novel activity expansion, we did at the end of 2019 was distributed ledger technology, where it was sort of going a little bit stale. There was a lot of hype about it and not that much understanding. So we wanted to work with some partners, in this case, the Digital Catapult, EPSRC and GCHQ, to try and investigate the potential possibilities, you know, dispense with the myths and show some real use case examples of where it could be used and where it had been used. As I say here, underline the issues, then there is a need for clarity. There was a lot of hype and we were trying to separate that from the reality. We were also, as I said, highlighting appropriate use cases and trying to promote research into scalable distributed ledger technology. So we managed to involve some quite interesting people. So for instance, the UK were lagging behind here a bit. They hadn't really coordinated things that well. So we got someone from the Dutch Blockchain Coalition to present what they had done for a national approach. And then we had the Catapult talking about the sort of business end of sort of the blockchain area. We also looked at legal aspects. So we involved the UK Jurisdiction Task Force legal statement on crypto assets and smart contracts, and I actually think that was quite nicely timed because that had literally just been released in the public domain. And then we looked at the investor perspective. So, you know, that was an example of us trying to coordinate things and try and push things forward, but there was sadly not very well coordinated funding on that, so there was no real push from government funding. Mathematical challenges in the electromagnetic environment. I think maybe one or two of my DSTL colleagues will be here, but this was really, the gist of this was to create a mathematical framework for this area. This is the congested and contested electromagnetic environment. You know, there were some sort of classic disciplines that had been working on it, like electronic engineering, signal processing, those sort of people, comms engineering. But what we wanted to do was to bring together other areas, because DSTL quite rightly, and this has certainly turned out to be the case, thought that we were missing a trick by not bringing in the mathematical sciences communities to help solve some of these ongoing challenges. And so you can see here, this is just a few of them. If you'd see my spreadsheet, when I was pulling all these sectors together, all these sort of subfields, we had a huge array of different disciplines. I'd say people from radio astronomy through to information theory, which actually turned out to be quite pivotal, and also, as you can see, a number of other areas. So the idea was to use a mathematical approach which could provide novel insights for this area. And we kicked off with a 3-day challenge workshop physically in January 2020, and we followed this up with another virtual one in September. And then in January, we had a 3-day virtual study group working on formulated challenges. And I'm pleased to say that this is part of a project which is going forward. And we're looking at the moment of using this K-Hub technology, which is a sort of a digital framework to build communities and to share information. And we're in the process of setting that up at the moment. We recently had a 4D event, 4-dimensionalism in large scale data sharing. And this was really to highlight the potential of 4D and to help build a community. One of the key things here is that the people involved, so that was Dame Wendy Hall, GCHQ, and a number of other leading people connected with this 4D SIG and the Centre for Digital Build Britain, recognised that there's a key role for outreach, and this is where we're trying to help to reach out to a wider audience interested in this area, because it has great potential for the future in terms of information management. And but there is a recognition that there isn't enough known about it, and we need to upskill. So the educational aspect really is to help develop a more knowledgeable community going forward. In terms of our expansion, David's going to talk a bit more about that, but really, I think our remit has grown hugely. We are busier than we've ever been. To allow for this, we've sort of zooped up our governance. We've been increasing staff numbers, and we've increased collaborations with a number of organisations, as mentioned here. We've also been very busy following the establishment of V-KEMS. David will touch on V-KEMS, but we're not really going to say that much about it now, because some of our colleagues are going to be presenting on that on the 25th of May. And in terms of broadening activity, yes, we'll be continuing on with these study groups, and we're going to be doing more partnering activity, as mentioned here. We're doing ongoing sort of brokering. So, for instance, we've been working with Innovate UK's A4I activity. So that's analysis for innovators. Some of you may have heard of this, but it's all about connecting mathematicians with companies who need to solve quite tricky and long-running technical problems. We did some work on that about a year or so ago, and we're hoping to continue that relationship going forward. We recently hosted the UK graduate modelling camp with Oxford. Chris Brouard, and that was very successful. That was the end of March, and we hope to do more of that going forward. I think I'm probably coming to the end of my slides now because I'm running out of time. So with the pandemic, we've really had to evolve, and we've had to increase our role, and of course that of the INI as well. So we've been doing a range of these shorter activities. We've taken some pre-booked activities and we've split them up into sort of bite-sized chunks. At March 2020, we partnered with ICMS and the KTN to form V-KEMS, and that's going to be discussed on the 25th of May. There's some really nice examples there. We've been very busy recently. We kicked off in January working with the RAMP initiative, so that's the Royal Society's Rapid Assistance for Modelling the Pandemic, to pull through impact in various tasks, and that's linked up with the Juniper Consortium. So we're basically taking key research strands. We had something on vaccinations and also aerosol transmission recently, and there's a sort of small spaces and urban analytics one coming up later this month. So we're very busy with that. And we're also looking, connected to V-KEMS, at working with GCHQ to help them with their summer internships, potentially working on projects which were linked to V-KEMS projects and linked in with the Heilbronn Institute going forward, and possibly a distributed summer school in 2022. So it's really sort of just to say that in the future, I predict that we're going to be doing about a third of our events virtually going forward. We're really looking forward to doing more physical events again. We're going to be doing some hybrid events. I'm planning to do our Soft Matter Symposium in September as a hybrid event because it's a global conference and clearly not everyone's going to be able to come. But we do see a role going forward for more virtual delivery as well. And with EPSRC funding, we're going to be able to do a lot more and expand our activities and hopefully connect better across the mathematical sciences and deliver more for everybody. And so over to David, and I apologise, I've slightly overrun.
Thanks, Jane. Hopefully my picture will appear, and if you could stop sharing your screen, I can share mine. Okay. I'll just share mine. Okay, I trust you can see those. Thank you very much, Jane. So Jane's presented an overview of the expanding role of the Gateway. And you can see that over the last few years, the pictures become very much more complex in the way we've dealt with the question of knowledge exchange. It's not just about taking the existing programs in the Newton Institute and seeing what can be done in the way of producing a broader audience for that activity. It's really about brokering, I think, and creating communities to address key challenges either from outside or presenting opportunities of exciting mathematical developments inside and seeing where they can go. And Jane says mostly the Open for Business events are orientated to the more statistical or applied mathematical programs, but of course we do have some pure ones where we can extract something interesting, for example in topological data analysis. We had some interesting Open for Business events associated with a quantum field theory and a rough paths program recently, so we can do a lot in that regard. Anyway, my part of this talk is to really think about where we go next. So we had a question early on, as when I was director, as where does the Gateway fit into the Institute? All of the signals in our society is that impact of mathematical sciences is here to stay. It's a valuable and indeed an intrinsic part of the process of mathematical research. So I saw that the coming together of the Gateway and the Newton Institute was very valuable, and that's what we've been doing. And so the walls between the two sectors of our institute now much more permeable. We've also, as Jane has mentioned, worked very, very closely with ICMS, so that's our sister institute in Edinburgh. They have less resource for knowledge exchange, but we do a huge amount with them. And as has been mentioned by Jane, V-KEMS has been our response to addressing questions associated with the pandemic, not directly usually related to the sort of the epidemiology, although we have done quite a lot, but it's indirect questions associated. And as Jane said, we will get onto that in the next day of the Maths 2021 IMA events. So some key questions for us were, what are the optimal ways to continue to support the community? How should we expand? And what areas should we expand in, because we have limited resource? And if we need more resource, where is this going to come from? How will the community respond to the continuing need to ensure impact? So we know we're very much driven by UKRI and other pressures from government on ensuring impact. Can we do this in a way which doesn't make people feel sensitive that their research is being driven away from blue skies to more applied? So we need to make sure that we maintain a conversation where knowledge exchange is valuable, but not feeling that people are having to do it against their wishes. The really valuable thing I've learned is that the convening power of what we do. When we do it through the Institute, we get a really strong audience. We get an understanding from outside about what the mathematicians are doing, and we can therefore produce events which are not achievable by other means. And I think that's really remarkable. And of course, in all of this conversation I'm going to have, I tend to talk about internal mechanisms, but we really be thinking about our engagement with industry, government, etc. So it's complex, and sometimes I'm in danger of not seeing what our stakeholders really want. Okay, so where are we up to now? We really at an interesting stage in the development of the gateway, but also in the development of knowledge exchange in the UK. And I should say that knowledge exchange in the UK is probably leading across the world. I think we are more advanced in our thinking, and we have got our act together more effectively, but there's far more that we can and should be doing. So there's three things which have happened recently which make this relevant now. First is that the government over the last 5 or more years have been talking about grand challenges, addressing global challenges through the Global Challenges Research Fund. And then they introduced a few years ago the industrial strategy and introduced a very large sum of money, something like 5 billion, towards an industrial strategy. And then the Challenge Fund was the way that the scientists can deliver through that fund. There was something they set up called the Strategic Priorities Fund, which is large projects which identify particular things that communities can do, and then RCUK changed to UKRI, United Kingdom Research and Innovation, where innovation was really part of it. And I think innovation is about translation of the research that's being funded by the government into a broader set of communities and actions. So all of that meant that we had to get on board, otherwise the mathematicians are in danger of losing funding if we don't watch it. The second, which has already been mentioned, is the bond review. It was called the Era of Mathematics, and that suggested some ways that we as a community can really think about knowledge exchange in a sort of a more joined up way. And then in the beginning of last year, 2020, then there was an announcement of about a substantial increase in funding for mathematical sciences, this £300 pot. I'll talk about all three of those very briefly. Okay, so what have we been doing prior to the new money and prior to thinking about the bond review? The Global Challenges Research Fund and Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund came along And we as a community, because we tend to ask for small amounts of money, we don't need to work in large groups as experimentalists might want to do or need to do. We're not well equipped to take opportunities of these types. So our role at ICMS and the Gateway was to try and mobilize the community to see how we could do this, and to negotiate with the research councils about special pots of funding for mathematical sciences, almost to give them a leg up to addressing this. So that's what happened in 2018. There was another event in 2020. And essentially, that was to get mathematicians working as a coherent group to tackle global challenges abroad, flooding, disease, etc., which is affecting developing countries. Also building capacity in developing countries to address these challenges themselves. Okay, so building up capacity for mathematical research groups within those communities, and that's been quite successful. We had a meeting at ICMS on the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, and again, how we can address that. Then there was a Strategic Priorities Fund, and mathematical sciences put in a bid for that in the end of 2018. And that was really about thinking about KE capacity. So it was really about mobilizing the community and creating a sort of gateway on steroids. That wasn't funded, but it's still in the pipeline and informing the thinking within EPSRC. And then we had in 2020, just before the lockdown, what I think was a really important way forward. So again, these were what we called strategic workshops on innovative mathematics for the modern industrial strategy. And it was done in conjunction with the Knowledge Transfer Network, or the KTN. And it was broken down into two topics, one on formulation science, which is the science of mixing stuff together, whether it's for baking, for pharmaceuticals, for the oil industry. It's anything where you put materials together of more than one phase or type, and then the process that you do on top of that. Huge numbers of mathematical problems within that. And then the other was mathematicians for the circular economy. So again, these are topics which are not easy for mathematicians to engage in. So we can do all of the technology translation as long as you give a little bit of your time to see what might be interesting, where might the really interesting fundamental mathematical questions be hiding within those topics. So the first of those, formulation, was worked up into a full proposal, into a big idea, and it's now held by EPSRC in their Big Ideas Bank for when they have some funding to give us. Okay, so James already mentioned that we also have taken over ICMS and the gateway of the study groups, so I haven't got time to mention those. Okay, then there's this additional funding for mathematical sciences. And the announcement back in January last year talked about funding fundamental mathematical sciences, but also at the same time saying the reason we're funding it because we want to see that research translating into real world benefits to the community. So smarter phone technology, smoother traffic flow, crime prevention. That's what they used as the pull to get us the money. So we see the gateway and what we want to do with the gateway as delivering on that commitment of giving us that money. So we have to show that we delivered the benefits. Of that 300 million, 10 million came to the Isaac Newton Institute, 5 million to ICMS over 5 years. So this gives us a unique opportunity to do things, okay? So we were hoping to do it through that Strategic Priorities Fund bid, but instead we got this opportunity now with this uplift to INI and ICMS to do something on the knowledge exchange. So the bond review had 26 recommendations in it. The first one was an academy for the mathematical sciences. So we bear that in mind, that might we need an academy, and where does something to do with knowledge exchange fit into that? That's a story for another day. But item 14 on the bond list, shopping list, was a national centre in impactful mathematics to work with industry and government to drive mathematical research through to commercialisation. But it was recognised by Philip Bond that we need to really think about low TRL, which means fundamental research in universities, and vehicle to act as a national KE hub to translate that research in a way that gets it out and about. Okay, so that's really the point of where we see the next step of the gateway going. So expanded I&I gateway activity. So let's think about the way we might use this extra money to support research and also knowledge exchange. So I think thinking about this extra money to the Newton Institute, I mean more than just the money we're going to give to knowledge exchange, is ensure equality, diversity and inclusivity in everything we do. We want to be sustainable, and the lessons we've learned over the last year and a bit about doing things virtually will be very much continued in terms of sustainable mechanisms. We're going to be thinking about expanding the number of I&I programs locally, and also expanding them to get them out and about in the community. So more activity of I&I around the country to get to people and communities who don't find it easy to access the Institute because it's based in Cambridge. And the Gateway will be doing the same thing, getting more. And as Jane said, hopefully a third of the Gateway activities will be done outside Cambridge. But this second last bullet point is a connected centres model for KE network. Okay, so that's what we really want to propose, a scalable and flexible connected centres network for fostering and supporting KE across all UK mathematical science departments. So not just, you know, we run a load of events in the Gateway and at ICMS and people come along, engage and not, but we want to find a way of connecting every maths department in the country with what we offer in the Gateway and at ICMS. So we want to set ourselves up as a nexus to create this community. The vision is that we will have a set of something like 6 regional centres or nodes, and attached to those will be a load of satellites, which will hopefully be all the university math sciences departments. Then we'll have a comprehensive schedule of activities and a shared technology platform. Okay, so let's just show a picture. So we have a master node with I&I, Gateway and ICMS. We have regional nodes, and then everyone connects to those nodes. So that's just a very brief schematic. I won't show that for very long because it may be changed, who knows. Okay, but what's the benefits of this? So we really want to establish a much better connectivity between the places that do knowledge exchange really well. So there's Lancaster, Oxford, many other places that pride themselves on what they're doing in terms of facilitation of links. We want to take those people and integrate them into what we're doing. And then other places that want to build up their knowledge exchange capacity should also be members. And then we find a way of connecting everyone together. So it's about forging confederations, just jumping up and down the list, bridging communities, finding mechanisms to enable, say, PhD students to get some more experience at working with industry on problems related to their PhD through internships, springboard fellowships, which used to exist a few years ago. We want to build a team of super facilitators, I call them, to help all of the various satellites to broker activity. And then we build capacity. So if a company local to one university knocks on their door with a problem which they cannot address because they don't have the skill set or the number of researchers, then we produce that connectivity. And this builds on what we've been doing over the last few years with the gateway anyway. So we know how to do this in an established way. And it's a sharing of information, and local and national KE activities, so a calendar of events, is what we want to achieve with this. So I just want to end with a load of questions, really. The questions to you: is the suggested structure above, the right one? What is in it for the nodes and satellites to belong to this? We know that sometimes getting contacts with industry, getting problems from them, can be sometimes difficult, and you may want to take those and keep them for yourselves. So we don't want to make people give up their very good deep associations with industrial partners or others if they don't want to, but we want to make sure that we have, as a community, a critical mass able to deal with bigger challenges and to be able to move problems around or expertise around to bring the right people to bear on the right sorts of problems. Okay, so I've just put down a number of bullet points. So the fourth bullet point: we need to get buy-in and collaboration from the whole maths sciences community, otherwise this won't really work. So existing KE centres of excellence need to be persuaded there's something for them. Small places with no track record need to feel that their limited resource needs to be spent on some of this activity to benefit from it. How do we link with the learned societies? We know the IMA has very close links, as does RSS, with industry. And how do we share those and not compete? And then how do we bring in all of the other organizations, the Alan Turing Institute, Heilbronn, and then those associated, the catapults, but not necessarily in our community. And I think, again, organizations that do mathematical sciences research within their organization, so Microsoft, Google, they have very large teams. How might we engage with them in a sort of formal way with this Connected Centres network? Because certainly we know that they're doing a lot of fundamental research as well as more applied, and it will benefit all of us if we have a much more permeable way of working, which gets around IP and non-disclosure agreements, etc. So all that has to be thought of. Local versus national priorities. How do we put in place the vision thing? So do we need an academic director of this? I'm sure I said on a previous slide that the Gateway will be putting in, through our additional funding, some money for a Connected Centres network manager. So we'll have administrative support built in. But where do we get money for an academic director of a network if we need one? And then what do we see as our steady state vision for this? And what is our pathway to get there? So how do we grow the existing knowledge exchange to form this community? And then final question is, if we're going to build up a national academy, does the Connected Centres eventually become the knowledge exchange arm of an academy? So I think with that, I think I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane and David, for that brilliant presentation on knowledge exchange. And we've only got 5 minutes, so I'm not going to waffle on. We've got quite a few questions. So I'll start off by with the first one is, do you think the recent events of the pandemic have helped people in understanding mathematical concepts with terms such as data, modeling, graphs, distributions, R-number being mentioned on a regular basis? Do maths help in any way to improve that situation?
Yeah.
Shall I say it has a KE but non-mathematician view? I think the profile of maths has been increase, but I'm not sure it's always been in a positive way, and that's not our community's fault. I think it's the way that data, stats, etc., has been presented in the media, you know, quite often without proper context. And when you hear people like David Spiegelhalter talking in frustration at the way the stats and that have been, you know, conveyed, and also I think it's been positive in some ways, but I think also people's understanding of risk is still as limited as it was, and maybe is even a bit more confused. But I don't know what David thinks to that one. But
I think it has given an opportunity to see that scientists are relevant and important, so that's good. And the fact that they've wheeled out the chief medical officer, etc., and the fact that they've recognized that epidemiologists do things, they talk about the R number, and therefore we get onto the question of mathematical modeling. I think the term mathematical modeling has been used a lot, which is a great thing. As James says, risk and the understanding of risk is as poor as ever. But I think it has shown the value of, in times of crisis, of what we can do. We know that climate change, etc., is understood by many in the general public of a pressing need, and they recognise that modelling, in some sense, prediction, is a key element of that. I think we need to build on it. So undoubtedly, it's put us in, given us a higher profile, but we need to build on that. But the flip side of that question is, I think, as we'll see with V-KEMS, that our response to this has been exceptional. I think the maths community has mobilized it in itself in a way which is really commendable. People like Julia Gogg have done a fantastic job behind the scenes, and we will recognize that. So that, and we will have learned from that.
Yeah, I would second that as well. I think David mentioned before, and this is absolutely true, that we are one of the best in the world at knowledge exchange in the UK, and we've got a huge knowledge sector. We punch well above our weight, and I'm proud actually to see what our scientists and academics have done, you know, across the mathematical sciences and all the interlinked disciplines. People have literally flogged themselves to death, and we've worked even harder in the gateway to try and make life easier for the academics that we're working with. So we support them as much as possible. I always say to people, we'll do most of the doggy work, so you don't have to, just to make it easier, because so as David mentioned, people like Julia Gogg and that, they just work so hard, and I don't know, they just sort of don't have the time to do any more than they're doing.
Thank you very much. We've got a few more minutes. So we've got a question from Hilary Ockenden. What about international collaboration?
Good question, Hilary. We've almost exclusively talked about UK, and of course that's not the case at all. But I think it's been, while we're building up the capacity in the UK, I've tended to focus on it. But I think we really should do more. You know that the Gateway is now holding the sort of UK card for EU Maths In, and we want to work with you to do more in Europe. But I think internationally, I think we'll do. I think once we get the this connected centres network, I think we will definitely have a component of that which will be externally facing. So it'll have an international element. So I've already been talking to Chris Brouard about resurrecting our scheme for sending PhD students around to study groups around the world, etc. So I think we have a good platform for doing that. How we do it in a coordinated way, we need your input and many other people's.
Thank you. I've got time for one more question from Daniel Lesnick. What kind of typical or generic knowledge do we need to be brought into the academic maths departments?
Is that from a KE point of view, are we talking about?
It doesn't say. Well, I would assume so, since the talk was on KE.
I think you know, we've been having conversations going back to sort of the bond review and probably before that with key people across the mathematical sciences K community, and people like Joe Jordan, for instance, who've always pushed forward the professional development of K professionals across academia. And I think that there will be opportunities within the Connected Centres framework to take this forward, and for us to share best practice and knowledge, and to have some sort of, you know, training with our fellow professionals across the UK, and hopefully bring those standards up and support our colleagues. David, would you concur with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think building up the expertise is really critical within the departments. Yeah, the sort of knowledge exchange facilitators. I think Daniel's question's as broad as that, and it's also about bringing in how do we develop knowledge exchange in departments? Where do we get the sort of ideas? And I see it two ways. It's exchange, as Jane always says. We start from the mathematical sciences and the mathematics research and see where we can go with that, and the communities that might be interested in that. So we set up the forums for doing that. And then also we bring the problems in from, we help translate those down to mathematical problems within the departments. And every department has a unique set of expertise and a unique set of contacts, and it's mobilizing those that we want to, which will make this Connected Centres network a success.
Thank you very much. I think we're out of time, so I just want to say thank you, David and Jane, for a fascinating and very clear overview of the Gateway's work and its plans for the future, particularly around connecting to the UK-wide community. And I think the key things I pulled out from that was buy-in and collaboration, and the IMA want to do a lot more of that with you and our other partners as well.